Hello there. Welcome to the World Citizen Global Teacher Takeaway Lesson Tutorial. This lesson is about cultural barriers. It's Supplemental Lesson 3 Takeaway with the Level 1 World Citizen Certificate in Civility for Global Teachers. And in this lesson, I will just pop up the actual lesson for you. If you are in the program, you would have seen these lessons provided as downloads in the online course, or if you attended a live session, they would have been provided for you in class. And so, this lesson is about cultural barriers, and we want people to understand that there are real and sometimes perceived barriers to being culturally accepting. And sometimes these barriers can inhibit peace or civility or the sharing of resources, getting along with our neighbors, all of those kinds of things. So this lesson is intended for children ages 5 to 10. And if you are a teacher, parent, somebody who is sharing these lessons, you know that, of course, the intellect and interest level for children as age 5 could be very different for children age 10. And so we ask you always to review the entire lesson, first and foremost to make sure that you personally agree with the philosophy, that you understand the activities and the approach, and that you are comfortable delivering the lesson. And second, that you know who your audience is. Oftentimes we have split the children, so ages maybe 4 to 7 are together and ages 8 to 10 are together, and that way we can change our approach ever so slightly to meet the level, both social and academic level of the children. You may also find that, depending on your cultural background and the country you're teaching in, the way you deliver the content or your experience, which enables you to tailor it and add in bits based on your experience, might be different. So, in this lesson, the objectives are to help children understand what a barrier is. We want them to understand how and why culture can be a barrier, and we want them to be able to explain for others and to experience and exhibit themselves how to see past and overcome barriers. So, from a social competency point of view, this is a continuous learning strategy. It also relates to oral communication and thinking skills, and you need to have this mindset in order to collaborate, and part of this skill is built on curiosity, which is one of the 21st century learning competencies. So, listening skills, oral communication, asking questions, those are all aspects of the skill that children need to be able to be culturally competent, and one part of that is understanding cultural barriers. So, as we carry on through the lesson, and I presume most of you have seen some of these other World Citizen lessons, they are all written in exactly the same way. They have a little timetable, recommended pre-reading and resources for the trainer. We would always recommend, and by the way, in this case, training is interchangeable with teacher, but for the global teacher program, we reference teacher because the majority of people taking this course have been invited based on their academic experience. So, it's a really good idea to review this content, even if some of it seems that it's beyond the knowledge that you will need to convey to the children. Part of this is because when we're talking about culture, it's important that you as the leader be able to express at a higher level maybe to parents who might want to attend sessions on culture, due in part to variances in beliefs and values, and they might not feel comfortable unless they know what you're going to teach and why you're teaching it. So be sure that you can explain the concepts at different levels, both for the young children as well as their parents or caregivers. So there's quite a bit of research on this topic, of course. If you wanted, you could expand the lessons for older children. And as always, although we do have World Citizen core content that's intended for adults, you could take some of the content in these lessons and expand it for an adult audience. So, moving along through here, there's several resources. We have an activity called Diversity Dress Up that we use in this lesson. And you can use all different sorts of cultural clothing. I like to collect that during the year. We have right now this concept of cultural appropriation. And my sense is that children at this age are too young to understand what that means. While I might hesitate to dress children up in culture costumes or attire that is not their own, for example, for dress-up parties or Halloween, I might be careful with that messaging. But in this case, where it's strictly about teaching awareness and raising understanding of culture and tradition, where it's intended in a educational and encouraging way, where we're highlighting positively all of these changes and variances, I think it's okay to dress up this way. Once again, I think it's important to let parents know that these are activities that you'll be engaging in, and if there's any objections, children could be exempted, or sometimes parents will ask to bow out of the activities. So we want to be respectful of everybody's view on that. I think that's something really interesting for us to talk about. You know, what is culture appropriation and what is not? And so you might consider researching that on your own. And it's not a topic we need to discuss with these children at this age, but I think it is something that might come up in your work as a world citizen and as a global teacher. So there are some books and resources. Children love storybooks, and so I would look for books in your country or culture, in your language that you can use. There are often books similar to what we've provided here. Please know in advance that all of the sources and resources, our intention is not to provide a sort of North American-centric view. However, our head office is based in North America, and so one of the goals of the World Citizen Project is to pull together trainers and teachers from all over the world and to encourage them to share their experiences and perspectives, their resources, their interpretation of the lessons and the content, so that we can all learn from each other and practice what we preach. So please, if there is anything that ever causes any offense or perceived to be harmful in any way, don't hesitate to send us a note, events@civilityexperts.com, and we will do immediately what we can to remedy. But please know going in that although I understand that impact matters more than intention, we really have the purest of intentions in presenting this content. Okay, one thing that I find children really love is puppets, and if you have experience with the Muppets, the puppet show, Kermit the Frog talks about, the rainbow connection. And for this lesson, I think it's a lovely video to show. If you can find puppets of the frog and let children imitate and sing along, this big rainbow, you can get a roll of paper on the floor, as from one side of the room all the way to the other side of the room, and let children create a rainbow. We can talk about how each color can mean something in different flags. We can talk about aspects of rainbow, as a symbol, maybe with older children. We do have some lessons on gender further on. I think it's level 3 with Global Teacher. In any case, these are some resources. Please watch them, and if you think they're appropriate for your group, of course, you're encouraged to use them. So we have our little lesson plan here. We have our objectives, what we're trying to teach here. Let me see where we put those. I must have skipped over them. Yes, here. The culture barriers. So I did mention it. We're going to talk about barriers. So there's our books. Here's our terms to know. Once again, you can use a matching exercise. You can word puzzles, all kinds of ways to present those terms to know. And then prior to the session, we're going to prepare the materials. We're going to make sure everybody has a name tag and introduce the concept of names being related to culture often. And we're going to remind the children what we learned in Lesson 1. So we provide as takeaway 5 lessons, and they're intended to scaffold. So we encourage you to do Lesson 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5, and the bonus lesson, and deliver them in the order that they're provided because the concepts build on each other. So in theory, children will already have a sense of what culture is. We can review or remind them. And then we're going to talk about how culture makes us interesting and special. But sometimes we only see the differences, and these are called barriers. So we want children to understand what a barrier is, that it's something that stops us from doing or thinking or saying something. And we're going to do an activity that shows literally, what a physical barrier looks like and how it works. So in this case, we put the children into teams or groups, and in advance we'll set up a barrier. So maybe we put tape or a child's gate, or somehow we block the door to the bathroom, or we put some of the children and something on one side of a physical barrier. Maybe it's a row of chairs blocking things off. The idea is we want to make a barrier to prevent access to something or someone. Then we're going to ask the children to try get the treat or get to the other children. So you can put all the children on one side of the barrier and maybe some candies or special pencils or stickers or something on the other side of the barrier. Or you can put children, split them into a group and put one on each side of the barrier. And we're going to give some ground rules. You can't move the barrier. You can't climb over the barrier. What are they going to do? So then we're going to let the children try. The idea is to create a scenario where it's very difficult for them to get across that barrier. And in the end, we hope that some children might actually say to the other children, let me help you get over, or let's go around the barrier, or I'll pass you some candies or stickers through the barrier, those kind of things. Sometimes they'll do things like create a way for them to communicate across the barrier. So if you put children in one room and the wall that separates another room is the barrier, sometimes they'll knock on the wall in different patterns to send a message, knock, knock, and the other side knocks back. And this is interesting because we can start talking about how there's different ways to communicate across barriers. So we want children to know that this is a real barrier. It's physical. We can see it with our eyes, and it actually exists. But sometimes there are imaginary barriers, or there are things that might stop us from doing things that we have in our head that something is a barrier, but it's actually not. So then we're going to give some examples, and we'll let children add their own ideas. One idea of an imaginary barrier is the idea that girls can't do what boys can do. Old people aren't smart like young people, or aren't as fast, So you're going to take some general stereotypes and explain to children that these are sometimes things that we believe that stop us somehow from interacting with each other or working well together. The list can be quite expansive, or it can just be a couple of things, and the older children frequently come up with a lot of things. We want to make clear to the children that these barriers are perceived and that they're not real, that we make them real when we say them out loud, and that when we have in our head that they're a barrier, sometimes that stops us from finding a way around the barrier or over or through the barrier. So this is called bias, and this is a good way to introduce the term, that a bias is a barrier to accepting people of other cultures. So we might say things like, those people believe something different than we believe, or people from that country smell funny, or people from this country are rich, or people from this country are only good at math. We don't have to state the country, we can just make the generalized statement. And we don't want to perpetuate stereotypes, but we have to help children understand that they should be curious and question things that they hear to find out if they are true or not. And this is a really good way to subtly introduce the concept of continuous learning, that it's a curiosity and the ability to ask questions is critical for 21st century learning. And then after the break, and again, you can have the children do different activities, games, whatever you want for a break. And then we want them to do an activity to show how bias or believing things without asking questions can be harmful. So this is a fun activity that we've used a few times with success in our courtesy camps. And what it incorporates is some secret boxes. So depending how many children you have, you might make several boxes, but we have a box, and inside the box we've got fuzzy cloth, wet spaghetti, rubber bugs, candy, and we're going to make the boxes so that the child could put his or her hand in, but that they can't see the contents. We're going to make one box pretty, the others will be just plain, maybe one will look dirty or, kind of wrinkled or crumpled up, bent maybe. And we're going to put the candy or treats in one of the ugly or plain boxes. Then we're going to make some black circles, about 24 inches across. So and we're going to place them in the ground. So then the way the activity works is we say to the children, if I tell you there's a prize in one of these boxes, would anyone like to guess which box the prize is in? Let the children speak and let the children approach and choose a box. Usually most children will assume that the treat or the good thing is in the pretty box. And we want to explain to them that this is a bias. Most of us believe that nice things come in pretty packages, and we believe this about people and about things. So most of us choose people who look like us, and we think that, maybe we look nice or clean or pretty, and so that people who look like us must also be, nice or clean or pretty or good. And you can expand that lesson and the interpretation of things as much as you might like. We can also explain that reverse bias is, thinking that what's in the dirty box or the bent box is also is always a bad thing. Sometimes it's good things and come in packages. You can't judge always by what you see on the outside is the point. And then once they've all done that, and of course it's a good idea to let them have some fun, put their hand in each of the boxes, squish the wet spaghetti, rubber bugs, all of that. Let them play a little bit. And then we try another activity. And here's where we put the black circles on the floor, and we ask children to pretend, use their imaginations, and these are holes in the ground. I should have clarified here, we've got 2 or 3 paper circles, each is a different size, but about 24, so one might be, really small, and another one's going to be big, maybe 3 feet wide. Anyway, we're going to ask them if we're pretending these are holes, which one would they want to step in? And most children will say the small hole, and when you ask them why, they'll say they think it's smaller, so it's probably safer and not so deep. And we explain to them that this is called an assumption. It's a belief that is not proven. Sometimes it's based in logics or experience, but assumptions are like bias. They help us make decisions, but they're generally wrong. So we explain to them, for example, a small hole could be very deep and very dangerous, but a big hole could be shallow and safe. So we want children to understand that when we see differences, how people look on the outside or how they act, we have to make sure that we're not making assumptions or decisions based on a belief or a bias that is not true. And then we're going to ask, how do we overcome these biases? And then we want to explain to children that a good thing, and apologies here, these are draft lessons that I'm using here, a good thing is to be curious and ask questions. All right, so then we're going to assign some homework. You can ask children to go home and talk to their parents or family, or to think about other things when they're going through their day, did they make a quick judgment, or did they notice a bias in somebody else or something else that they did or said? As always, we have these takeaway quizzes. For the older children, I print them out and I give them to take home. And, sorry, there's another typo here. This should not be bolded. We want them to take them home if they like. And we use it as a review for the next session as well. So that's that lesson on cultural barriers, and I hope you enjoy it. If you have questions or ideas that we can add to the lesson to make it better, or share some bias that you know in your experience of different cultures, don't hesitate to send it to us, events@civilityexperts.com. Thank you.